Hello there, good people. Patricia here. And today, man, the motivation for this one is all about what's going on in the headlines. And there's always so much, right? But this one in particular, because I, as a lawyer, am just flabbergasted by it, and also as a Black woman in the United States. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the Supreme Court's decision and the Voting Rights Act uh, just being over, just being uprooted in the last couple of days. And so that's where we're headed today, and why I'm saying this truly is showing a crisis in leadership in our country. But before we dive forward into that, please remember to hit like and subscribe to help forward this conversation to others who might be interested in it, as well as to continue with our effort to build up this channel. So here's the thing, a couple of caveats. Number one, nothing that I say in here should be considered as legal advice or an official legal analysis or anything like that. I'm an attorney, a licensed attorney. I'm not going down for stupid stuff that people misinterpret, right? So that's the first thing. This is truly just my opinions, um, lit, very much surface level opinions at this point. Because the second caveat is I have not yet read the entire decision, which I will do, but I want to be able to do that from a more level headed space and not one of reactionary and emotional. I want to read. I want to read this decision like a lawyer, and so I will get to that in the coming days. But what I have been doing is listening and reading the synopsis of people that I trust, whose opinions I trust to provide fact based uh, uh, summaries, as well as then getting into like what does this mean for our country, for voting rights, uh, and civil rights and all of those great things. So that's where my basis in conversation is. And granted, like I said, this is like fresh. This is all within a couple of days of this decision coming down and catching everyone off guard. So one of the things that I always like to say, especially when there's some major incident, whether it's externally out in the world or even within my own um, sphere of control of things, when something unusual or crisis level happens, is yes, you may have to respond, but you don't necessarily have to react. And the distinction I'm making there is when you react to something, you're just like going flying right off the cuff and it's just like whatever, versus giving a little bit more thought to it, and or even withholding judgment or commentary on the situation until more facts arise, until more information comes about. And that definitely applies to a whole other rip from the headline stories that I'm not sure I'm going to touch. That one happened within the last 7 days as well, and that's just as crazy. Actually, it's crazier, but that's for another conversation. Um, White House correspondent dinner. That's it. So, but let's just deal with the most recent crazy crisis, which is, you know, I'm not going to do the history lesson. Anyone can go do the research on that. But the bottom line is the Voting Rights Act was put into place more than 60 years ago in response to efforts from the civil rights movement to make sure that all people in this country, and even more specifically, Black people, people of African American descent, had the right to vote in this country uninhibited. Because even though quote, you know, the country had fought a war over slavery and black people were made free by this quote war, they were not free. We were not free to do a lot of things. There were still so many restrictions that even to this day, in particular places, especially in the South, where there are still the undercurrents of what happened so many decades and years ago when it comes to housing, when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to voting rights, like so many different things that have this very long historical undercurrent to it tied back to slavery. And if you don't believe me, start reading. Reach out. I'll send you a reading list to start with. And so, a great book, The Color of Law. I can't show it to you because my daughter stole my copy. But The Color of Law is a great place to start when you want to learn a little bit about uh, racial underlining, profiling when it comes to housing and areas of the city and all of the lovely things being written into codes for black regarding black people and where they live, how they live, all of that. So when it comes to voting rights, like this is a slow build because think about it. Oh, you've got black people who have been trying to exercise their right to vote about who represents them in Congress, in our local areas, all across the country at all levels of government. People think, oh, this just applies to, no, it truly does impact everything, right? And it's just most prominently the effect on our congressional representation at the national level, at the House of Representatives, and you know uh, not as much the Senate because every state gets two. But when it comes to Congress, it's based on these maps and where people live and how the lines are drawn. And there have been numerous attempts across the country, most notably in my state, Texas. This has been going on for years while I have been alive, uh, where efforts to redistrict and draw lines so that a certain party, in our case, the Republican Party, would have an upper hand. And normally, in order for that to happen, that means drawing out a Democrat. Well, it's not just any Democrat. Most of the time, the effect is on Democrats who are people of color. And because if the area is represented predominantly by people of color, blacks, like there's a huge Latino community in Texas, but most of these redistricting maps and whatever have been really drawn around African American communities. The most recent one in the last 12 months doing exactly that with an attempt to redistrict out 5 seats. One of the most notable ones being Jasmine Crockett in the Dallas area, who was literally, her house was drawn outside of her area, and then also showing some impetus for her running for Senate in the state. Okay, so what does all this have to do with this decision? This decision, in summary, has greatly gutted the Voting Rights Act. There are multiple levels to it. I'll put a link in to the Voting Rights Act. But from my understanding and the things I've followed and listening to, it's in particular Area 2, Section 2, which is specific about making sure that Black people are considered whole people and that they can be represented by folks and who they vote for, whoever they vote for, and that they will get to, well, the cleanest, shortest way to say this is that the Supreme Court, this current Supreme Court, on a 6-3 decision, has voted that a map in Louisiana that had been, redistrict, that had been drawn, around racial lines, that it was now unconstitutional because it was based on racial lines. But if it's partisan, it's not. Now people are like, well, shouldn't that make some kind of sense? Not based on the legislative intent of decades, decades of judicial decision making. This literally, like, this is why it's being said, it guts it. Because if you now make it about parties rather than race, well then sure, it's like, well, you can redistrict for party purposes, but what about that overlap between the partisanship and racial equity or disequity, inequity, however you want to say it? It's as if it doesn't exist. Now, this is why I want to make sure that I go read, and so there may be a part two of this, but go read the full decision for myself, both the prevailing decision of the six, and especially the dissenting opinions of the three. And it's very disturbing. And the reason why I say this is a crisis in leadership, because in our country, where we have historically relied on this structure, there's this three-pronged structure: the judiciary, the executive branch, and the congressional branch. They all are supposed to serve their purpose, right? The executive branch, which means the president and cabinet and all of that. Yes, the president gets voted in by the people in general, and then that whole electoral college mess, that's a whole other conversation that makes my head hurt. But okay, fine, that's one way. But then there's the congressional uh, arm, which is composed of the House of Representatives, so that there's representation of everyone in the country by their states based on the numbers of people in their state. Then you've got the Senate, so that's the second part of the Congress, which every state gets two. So that's the equal representation part. Like every state just gets two in the Senate, right? And then you've got the third branch, which is the judiciary, the courts, the impartial, the let's take a look at everything that's boiling up, what the legislative and the laws that have been put into place, and how that's bubbled up and how that charges. They're supposed to serve as checks and balances to each other. And this last decision, I mean, we already knew there's no check right now in the executive branch. The congressional branch is just, they're not checking the executive branch. The congressional branch is not checking itself. The way they will get checked would be with votes. And here's how it all circles around: votes from the people who vote them into office, right? And if we now have the judiciary, which is a separate, more thoughtful, supposedly bubbling up through the circuits and all of that, But you now have the greatest judiciary body in the country, the Supreme Court of the United States, saying, no, it's okay to gerrymander districts based on uh, partisanship by parties. Can't do it by race, which now means they've undercut people's ability to have impact, for their vote to have impact in the congressional branch. And this is why people are losing it. And if you're not losing it, you should be losing it, because ultimately this actually affects everyone. Now, if you are of the mindset and are okay with people who are not of your skin tone, background, race, whatever, having equal rights under the law, then this might not bother you. And yes, I just said that because those are absolutely the undercurrents of what's going on here. And the reason why it is so important for everyone to engage, to do some homework, to not just brush it off. It's like, I can't do anything about this. Sure, you can. You can engage in conversations about it. You can, yes, always vote, but how about starting even at your local level, right? Start raising questions and doing things and getting involved. There is still something you can do. Now, ultimately, again, long haul, long term, this is major, because these are things, the judiciary decisions are ones that are not generally made uh what's the word? I'm not even going to say irrationally, even though that's true too, but not quickly. Like, there's a process, and that's the whole point, right? There's a process. There's precedent, which means there's other cases that have gone before, and not just the case itself, but the decision making that went behind the case to help the new justices that come along to reach back. And has the court shifted down through the years? Sure. But this one is so far that it reeks of having been polluted with partisanship, which is why it's so concerning. And it's why it's very upsetting, both for me as a lawyer who has sworn to uphold the laws of the country, right? Like, lawyers have to take an oath as well. Like, we have to take an oath. And as a Black woman, twice over, right? Because Black people had to earn the right to vote, and women had to have earned the right to vote, right? There were amendments for both women and Black people to be able to have the right to vote in this country, because historically that did not exist. Understand this. This is why this matters. Here's the other factor. And I think I did a video on this. I'll have to go back. It may not be marked as ripped from the headlines just yet, so I'll have to go back. But the SAVE Act that is still circling around in Congress right now absolutely impacts a woman's right to vote, because of the requirements that they're trying to put in place to say, oh, your ID must match your birth certificate. If you are a married woman in the United States and you changed your name, your birth certificate is never going to match any ID that you choose to use currently, because your maiden name is what's on your birth certificate. Your legal name could be changed if you went through the process at Social Security because you got married, and took your husband's name, tradition, your birth certificate is never going to match. Never. Now, are there supposed to be some workarounds under discussion? Sure. But I'm not hearing positive things about that. And other people are affected. People who were adopted, people whose original birth certificates are no longer available because the hospital or the area where they go, like, it was destroyed or lost. I mean, there are so many reasons. And women are the primary folks who will be impacted by this, but not the only ones. Not the only ones. Under the falsities that people who are not documented residents of the United States are, trying to vote, which is false. There has been research, independent research done and confirmed for years. Like, the percentage is so low, you can literally count them across the country, not by state, like across the country. So the premise for doing this is faulty as well. So yeah, this was a little bit heavier, but ripped from the headlines are some of the things that are definitely going to be talked about on this channel, because there are things that are happening that are important and they impact how we function in our everyday lives, in our work life, in our home life. Like, if you're going to be a whole person and celebrate who you are completely, like, you need to be able to acknowledge everything that's going on in the world around you. And this leadership crisis that we have right now in the United States it's beyond bubbling up. I mean, hello, it's just exploding. And yeah, there's probably going to be a follow-up, because how do you address a large scale leadership crisis that seems impossible to overcome? Oh, that is its own separate conversation that I probably want to dig down into, and maybe even do more of a master class because it goes beyond what's going on in our world today with our governments, whatever, because it happens in all areas of our lives. And a reminder that this is not the first time that this has come up in this country. It's come up several times. We fought wars over it. We fought ourselves within this country over it, over leadership crisis. So, some thoughts there. Would love to get your input. If you're interested in a follow up conversation, let me know in the comments. And I challenge you to start thinking about how you can make a difference in your community, which is your home, your workplace, your uh, uh, the area in which you live, right? What is it that you can do? And if you're at a loss at that, because I get it, it's very overwhelming, then keep an eye out, because I have been saying for quite some time that I was going to revive an advocacy series that I created many, many years ago, and it's overdue. So that's probably going to be a project for this month that's going to get fast tracked to getting done, because I spent some time talking about how people could be better advocates when they approach the legislature. But I think I'm going to open that up to being better advocates in your life and in your area with some targets. And it can be something that everyone can use, because speaking up right now is very important. it's affecting not just our lives right now today, but it's going to affect the lives of those who come after us, um, your family, your kids if you have kids. If you don't have kids, guess what? You're still affected because the people around you, your community, like they have kids. There are people who are coming up behind you, and this is why we should all care. Okay? I would love to hear from you. Hit me up in the comments. Let me know your thoughts, and we will follow up with you tomorrow. Take care.